Hey guys, welcome back to Introduction to Sociology with Dr. John. And today we're talking about religion, which is really a fascinating subject, and I wish I could go on forever, but we're trying to keep it in one lecture so that it doesn't take up too much time. And obviously, like anything else, you're welcome to always study further. What is religion? So basically, religion is a belief of a difference between sacred and profane. So that there is something supernatural beyond the everyday world that we cannot see or touch, but that we can sometimes influence. There's about 1 million religions in the world, and obviously they all claim to be true. So they can't all be true. Since they're different. They all claim to be eternal, but of course they change. Now, sociology as a science does not judge the veracity of any religion. Any one of those 1 million religions may be absolutely true. The point is we can't know because we can't judge. We cannot test the validity of these things. We cannot create a testable hypothesis to see which religion is more true than another religion. But we can study the effect of religious beliefs in the world. How does religion affect us? So, for example, Weber's Protestant ethic, Durkheim's work on totem and taboo, modern research on fundamentalist Islam and Christianity, studies of everyday religious life. So we're going to discuss some of that in this lecture. So every religion has three basic things. One is a belief in the sacred, that is the world beyond this world, the world of God or whatever mystical power exists. And then the profane, that's the everyday life that we can see and understand directly. And then rituals, these are the acts or the behaviors or the rituals that we have to use in order to bridge the gap between everyday life and the sacred life. And generally speaking, the rituals become the province of specialized people who control that area, that path. Not all religions have a shared belief in God. The early religions, the simplest religions, are what we call simple supernaturalism. In other words, they believe that there is some kind of magic power throughout nature. Sometimes this power can be manipulated. A word for this power is mana, but some words we also use luck or fate, right? Or some other force that we manipulate. And so usually this is associated with what we now call magic. So you do something and this creates a magical power. And this is very typical of simple hunter-gatherer societies. Although you'll notice that people still retain some elements of this. There's the belief in karma or a belief in luck or fate really goes back to this belief in mana. Animism is a more focused type of supernatural in the belief that there are specific spirits or beings in the other world that have generally very specific powers. So this became more prevalent in early horticultural society, and people would then appeal to these different bodies or spirits in order to get specific things. So, for example, if you wanted rain, you would appeal to the spirits of the clouds. If you wanted a good hunt, you would appeal to the spirits of the animals, and so on and so forth. Theism is the belief that these spirits now become gods. They're more powerful. Theism usually emerges in late horticultural society, early agrarian society, and now the gods have more power, they're more focused, usually they have specific names, and there will be temple places of worship, that people can go and pray to them for guidance or for favors, as it were. Right? So the belief is these gods they live in another world, but they're somehow involved and interested in what humans are doing. They sometimes get involved directly. So almost all these religions have some belief that gods come down and directly communicate with humans and tell them things, have conversations with them, and sometimes even have children with them. So you have demigods who are the children of a god with a human, and therefore will have some godly powers, but ultimately are still human. Early Judaism and all early civilizations were polytheistic. Even early Judaism was polytheistic. If you read the Old Testament, it's very clear that the ancient Jews believed that their God was their God, but they also believed that other tribes also had their gods. Right? So they were supposed to only pray to their own God, who said, I am a jealous God. Don't pray to any other gods. But that then changed to what we call monotheism. That is the belief that there is only one God for everything. Right? So monotheism believes in one God who is all-powerful, and this really only emerges in late Judaism, and then it becomes solidified with the combination of Judaism and Roman religion in the form of Christianity. Now what's interesting, at least some sociologists argue, is that as mankind has developed and become more powerful himself, or at least his society has, the gods have become more powerful, the supernatural powers have become more powerful. So some sociologists have argued that in reality God is kind of a substitute for society. What we're really praying to is society. But again, like I said, that is up for your belief system. Note also that these systems are rarely pure, that they're very often mixed. Like I said, many Christians and Muslims and Jews also believe in some forms of magic or fate or luck, which goes all the way back to the belief in a diffuse form of matter. Now, there is a heavy concentration, as I said, there are many, many religions, but the most dominant ones, of course, are Christianity. Of course, there are many different versions of Christianity. Protestantism in Northern Europe and North America, Catholicism in Southern Europe and South America. You've got Orthodox Christians. You also have Christians in areas such as Australia, South Africa, where basically Christianity has spread around the world, primarily through conquest. Right? So as Christians have conquered other areas of the world, they have brought religion with them. Islam also has, to some extent, spread from beginning in Medina, Mecca. It has spread throughout the Middle East and Northern Africa and even some places in Asia. And then you have Buddhism, which is more pronounced in Asia and doesn't spread as much except through, of course, population increase, and Hinduism, of course, also. So religions have a lot to do with where people have moved to, because religions are a part of culture. They're a part of a cultural belief system, or at least historically have been a part of those cultural belief systems. So, for example, in this chart, we see Ethiopia, Senegal. These are Christian countries, but they're very poor countries in Africa. And then you also have relatively poor Muslim countries as well at the top. Towards the bottom, you have more developed countries. So the more developed countries tend to have very low levels of religion. China is a bit of a different thing here, because it was a communist regime where religion was banned, or at least the dominant religion of Buddhism was banned or severely suppressed. So I would expect most people in China would say, no, I don't believe in religion just because they don't want to get put in jail. But most of these countries are highly developed countries, tend to have a lower level of religiosity. The United States is somewhere in the middle, and the United States has always been, as we began, a bit exceptional. Religious organizations. So we start with the church. So a church, I don't mean by the church the physical body or building of a church, but the church as an organization refers to a religious organization that feels that is uniquely legitimate in being the only legitimate faith or religious organization. So, for example, Catholicism throughout the Middle Ages did not accept other religions. If you were a member of another religion, you weren't just wrong, they would kill you, right? They would torture you. And the only exception was Jews because they had a special dispensation in the Bible. The denomination refers to the rise of Protestantism. So with Protestantism, there are a number of different sects, and eventually, after a period of about 100 years where they all tried to kill each other, they kind of came to an understanding and said, okay, you do what you want to do, we will do what we want to do. In other words, they accepted each other, but they didn't believe in each other, right? So Protestants would be like, well, he's a Christian, well, he's a Catholic, right? But that's okay. When we go to heaven, he'll be in hell, and then he'll find out. So you rely on God to sort it out, as it were. Then you have sect. A sect is a group that kind of breaks away from a dominant religious group. So it's established in religious tradition. In Protestantism, we have fundamentalism and we have evangelicals, both what we would consider sects, but they may be becoming denominations of their own. And then on the other hand, Islam, of course, you have various sects. We'll talk about some in a bit. And finally, you have cult. A cult is a group that tends to take religious beliefs from different religions, and both sects and cults tend to be seen as deviant because they're taking a different path, but cults are seen more deviant because they're taking from different religions and kind of making up their own religion as they go along. So very often they're viewed as very deviant by the dominant society, and they also tend to be to hide themselves off. They don't want to be seen by the dominant society. An example of this is the Jonestown cult, founded by a guy named Jim Jones in the 1970s. He got several thousand followers, primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area, and because he believed, or well, to some extent, he was under investigation, so he took his members all the way to Guyana in South America so that they wouldn't be investigated by the federal government. And he also started to do other things like preaching suicide and the need for suicide. And they would have suicide rituals where everybody would drink a liquid. They were told there was poison in it, and they would drink it. And this was a ritual he built into his regular weekly sermons, or whatever they were. And eventually one day, they actually put poison in, and almost everybody died as a result, because by the time they realized the glasses were actually poisoned, most of them had already died, or had already drunk it, and were going to die. How does religion affect change in the world? Well, we talked about Weber's view earlier. I'm going to kind of recap a little bit Weber's view and expand some areas of it. So basically, he believed that the basic ethic or logic or value system of Protestantism helped create or change our way of viewing the world so that capitalism became acceptable. Because before Protestantism, according to Catholicism, it was okay to be rich, but you couldn't become rich. So in other words, being rich meant that you were born rich, or maybe you became rich through conquest. Both of these were normally seen as legitimate forms of wealth, right? Because they were given by God. If you were born rich, obviously God meant you to be rich. If you became rich through conquest, well, that was obviously because God was helping you, right? There's a lot of belief in the Middle Ages that God operated through the sword. But for other people, like merchants and everyday people, to become rich was, well, you must mean somehow you're taking money from other people, and therefore you're committing a sin. So religion, according to Weber, is divided into four main groups, and these according to two different categories. So one is otherworldly religion, so religion that focuses on the afterlife. Others are this-worldly religions that focus on enjoying living in this world. The other dimension was non-ascetic, which means basically you just go ahead and live your life. You enjoy yourself as much as you can, without hurting other people, of course. And then you had ascetic. Ascetic meant you had to avoid enjoying life because the enjoyment of life is sinful, right? So how do religions break down? So, for example, otherworldly, focusing on the afterlife, but enjoying life while you had it, would be maybe Islam, right? Not all branches of Islam, but just as a whole. So they're worried about the afterlife. They pray 5 times a day. They're always worried about doing things so that they can go to heaven. But at the same time, while they're on earth, they're supposed to enjoy themselves. They're not supposed to worry about being ascetic. And there are some, like I said, some variations on that. Non-ascetic, this worldly, well, everyday Buddhists, everyday Catholics, you lived in this world, and basically you might as well enjoy it. You have to have kids, you have to make money, so you might as well enjoy it while you're at it. But the Catholic Church itself, the monks and the priests, they were told, no, you have to focus on the other world and pray all the time because you are the salvation for everybody else. And you have to be pure and avoid enjoying your life. In other words, your life has to be boring. You're not supposed to have any money. You're not supposed to procreate, etc., etc. Now, the way Protestantism was different is that Protestants said you have to be in this world, but you also have to be ascetic. In other words, you have to be in this world, but you can't enjoy it. It seems like a bit of a sad fate, right? So did Protestantism lead to religion? So basically there are two elements of Protestantism that Weber thought were crucial. One was the doctrine of predestination. So predestination says God is all powerful, so he already knows whether or not you're going to heaven. He doesn't have to wait around for you to be good or bad. He knows, right? And the other was asceticism, as we talked about before. Asceticism means you don't enjoy your life, you avoid any form of sin, and sin includes enjoying life, basically, right? So drinking, gambling, music, any form of sexual activity that might be enjoyable, right? So then, because we're predestined, we're going to worry, are we going to heaven or not? And we can't enjoy anything, so this becomes an obsession, right? So to avoid this obsession, they say, well, you have to work hard. Work all the time, so you stop thinking about it. And also, while you're working hard, you can't enjoy anything because you're working. So it looks like a great solution, right? As the Calvinists used to say, the idle hands are the devil's playground, because if you're not working, you're going to be thinking and having sinful thoughts. So what happens? You got all these people, they're sitting around, or they're not sitting around, they're working hard, and they're not drinking, they're not smoking, they're not dancing, they're not having any form of fun, right? So what's going to happen? They're going to start making money, right? Not just making money, but keeping money. They're going to start building up wealth. And then what's going to happen? They're going to say, look, I'm wealthy. God has blessed me. So they will see the wealth rather than as a sin, they will see it as a blessing from God. Now, why? Because why not? Right? They simply have to recalibrate from sinfulness to blessing, because it's a natural result of what they're doing. They're not sinning. They're not spending money on luxuries. They're just working hard. So therefore, they must be good people, and God must be blessing them. Now, Marxists don't agree, of course. They believe instead that capitalism emerged first, and then it changed Catholicism to Protestantism. Basically, the Catholics said, we need a religion that's going to suit our needs. A religion that's going to tell us that it's okay to exploit the masses because they're just a bunch of sinners. And a religion that says it's okay to amass a huge amount of wealth because you're just doing the will of God. Now, most sociologists tended to believe, particularly in the early days of sociology, that religion, whatever purpose it had in the ancient world, and most believed that religion, whether it's a functionalist that believed that religion was important to maintaining the social integrity of society, or a Marxist who believed that religion was necessary to justify the system of inequality. Yet both of them believed that over time, as society became more developed, the need for religion would decline from either way, and therefore religion would become a less dominant part of everyday life. This is called the secularization thesis, the idea that society becomes more secular as it becomes more developed. So remember with the chart we saw, where the more developed countries tended to become more secular over time. But notice also there were exceptions, such as the United States, such as the Middle East. Is secularization occurring? 50 years ago, you would say yes, because almost everywhere religion was declining. But in the late 1980s, or rather late 1970s, religious fervor tended to start to increase. Now, in the Middle East and in the West, a lot of it was due to a perception that the traditional value systems were being questioned or attacked, and in fact, it combined to create a belief system that they could go back to some earlier, simpler time where everything made sense. So in the West, two of these forms are called fundamentalism, and typically fundamentalism involves believing we have to go back to the roots of Protestantism, look at the Old Testament, and it's been very much motivated by opposition to some extent the civil rights movement, but mostly the women's rights movement and the homosexual rights movements. So these are movements that the Protestants or the fundamentalists strongly disagree with, because they believe in the Bible it says Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, And in the Bible it says, woman must serve her man who is her master, etc., etc. Evangelicalism is another form of, or a way in which religious significance has been rising again in the United States. This is a movement in which people believe that they have had a new epiphany, and Christ has come back into their lives. So these are people who were born Christian, maybe as Lutherans or Catholics or some other traditional brand of Christianity, but then they fall in with a new sect, this sect of evangelicalism, that tells them that their life is meaningless, that they have to structure everything around Christ, and that has become quite powerful since the 1980s. Some of these religious movements may be because they're resisting change, particularly the evangelicals and fundamentalists are accusing of using religion simply to limit or prevent social change, such as the women's movement and the homosexual movement mentioned before. Others also point to the fact that traditional religions kind of are there, but they don't really involve people very much. Whereas these new religions are very intensive. They're what we call high cost. They involve a lot of investment on the part of members. Members don't just go one day a week for Mass. They go maybe every day or every evening. They have activities in the church. They have prayer groups. They have masses. And so these fulfill maybe an empty place in the life of the members. On the other hand, while these new religions or sects tend to become more successful, they also have a lot of turnover because it's very demanding, and people get burnout literally from the amount that they're expected to participate. Another area where fundamentalism has been on the rise, of course, is in Islamic world. For example, Iran, in the 1950s, Iran began a huge modernization push, and with oil funding, opened up universities, developed advanced infrastructure and industry. But this then challenged a lot of the beliefs of the people, the peasants particularly, who were not really improved or helped much by these changes. And there was a huge backlash. So when the Shah of Iran was overthrown in 1979, this group of fundamentalist religious leaders took over and made Iran into the first fundamentalist religious state in the Middle East. Another group that has followed the same thought but in a different way is Al-Qaeda. We see them as a terrorist group because essentially they're not a state-based group, and they have used terrorist tactics such as bombings, and of course they caused the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center in the United States. And why? Because they believe that Christian values are basically corrupting Islam and destroying Islam from within with this new Western technology and belief systems. And they were particularly upset because when the United States invaded Iraq the first time, they did so from Saudi Arabia. So U.S. troops, Christian troops, were in Saudi Arabia, which is, in their belief, the sacred place of Islam. So it was like we were treading on their sacred soil. Another group, of course, more recently is Islamic State, or ISIS. And they believed, similar to Al-Qaeda, that they wanted to create a new caliphate, a new Islamic state that would control the entire Islamic world and revert back to, again, fundamentalist original Islam, in which they included such things as burning people who were not true believers, or throwing homosexuals off the top of buildings because these things had been mentioned somewhere in the Quran. So it's something like if you're a fundamentalist Christian, following the most fundamental things stated in the Old Testament and stoning women because they were unfaithful to their husbands, or stoning homosexuals or things like that. Now, these beliefs are not necessarily majority beliefs in the Islamic world. Of course, Al-Qaeda and Islamic State were very small minorities, but very, very, how would you say, emphatic minorities. I mean, these were people willing to die for their beliefs. Throughout the world, most Muslims are similar to denominations. They accept other religions, particularly Christianity and Judaism, and they don't necessarily repress other religious groups. Most Muslims are moderate, but again, fundamentalism has been growing throughout the world, and it's a good question. Why? Because we have this development, and maybe some of it has to do with the belief of being supplanted or having old beliefs destroyed. Maybe it has to do with them feeling left behind by this new world and therefore wanting to go back to a simpler world. So there's a lot of debate about the exact relationship between church and state. Throughout most of Christianity and Islam, the state has been controlled to a very large extent by religion, or has at least justified itself according to religion. So kings have always claimed, I was put here by God. With the rise of democracy and the idea that people choose the religious officials, particularly when people may be different religions, as in the United States, it was very clear from the beginning, the only way this is going to work is to say there's a separation of church and state, that the state should not advocate any particular religion, because otherwise people are going to be fighting and killing each other over it. But there's still a lot of debate about that. Very religious people believe that maybe the state should help impose their religious beliefs, and this does create a lot of controversy in the United States. A lot of people, though, still in the U.S. believe that public officials should not just think about their religious beliefs. Only 35% of the population in the United States believe that elected officials should base their vote on religious beliefs. That means the rest believe that they should base their vote on other things. So what are the main theories of sociology think about or view religion? We've already discussed this to some extent, but just to kind of rehash. For functionalists, remember, Durkheim saw society as a social glue. It helps to bring people together by creating a common belief system that everybody believed in. It also maybe helps people think about things they don't understand, such as what happens after I die. Totemism is a belief in which the clan is represented by a spiritual animal or plant. So Durkheim believed that in a way all religions provide a sacred representation of the social body. That when we're thinking of God, we're really thinking of society writ large. So we can't just get rid of religion, even though Durkheim didn't necessarily believe in religion. We can't get rid of it because the functions of religion, remembering the rain dance example, is not the manifest function of whether or not you go to heaven, but the latent function of bringing society together and giving people some kind of meaning system. What about the conflict perspective? Well, Marx is very famous for saying that religion is the opium of the people. He believed that religion was primarily designed to fool people into handing over their produce or their surplus to the rich or to the ruling classes. So religion was a part of the ruling system in any society. In ancient societies, it justified slavery. In modern society, it justifies the idea that if you're rich, God has blessed you. If you're poor, there's something wrong with you. So essentially, religion is there to maintain the status quo. And Marx himself didn't think that religion had any positive role in a future society. But other conflict theorists do believe that religion can be used. The religious ideals can be focused in a different way. So, for example, in Latin America in the 1980s, there was a movement called liberation theology. And this does happen quite a lot, actually, where religious movements emerge supporting the rights of the poor because they go back to things that Christ said about the evils of the rich and the virtues of the poor, and the meek shall inherit the earth. And comments like that can of course be used to say, look, we need a change in the way things are doing. The church needs to support a much more just policy in the political and the economic sphere. So thank you very much. I hope these ideas were interesting to you, no matter what your religious beliefs are, and that you'll continue to study these issues. In the meantime, I'll see you on the next lecture. Thank you.